Okay, now in this video we'll be seeing about apoptosis. Actually, apoptosis it is nothing but a pathway of cell death. We need some pathway to a pathway for cell death. So that is called apoptosis. That is induced by a tightly regulated suicidal program. So that suicidal program it will be inducing the cell death. So the tightly regulated suicidal program which will be inducing the cell death and gives a pathway for that in which cells destined to die actually. So since it is regulating a tight regulating giving computing a program and giving it to the giving it to the cell for its own death in own death. So in this process the arachas and cells are actually destined to die. Why do they die? Because to activate intrinsic enzymes. So certain intrinsic enzymes that will be degrading the cells. Okay, so there will be a tightly regulated suicide program which is inducing the pathway of cell death, and that is nothing but apoptosis. In that pathway, okay, cells it is destined to die or to die because to die not by how it dies by activating intrinsic enzymes. What those intrinsic enzymes do? That will be degrading the cell's own nuclear DNA. We have nuclear DNA, and the own nuclear DNA it will be degraded by the intrinsic enzymes. Okay, nuclear DNA and nuclear and not only own nuclear DNA but also nuclear and cytoplasmic proteins. Okay, not only nuclear DNA but also nuclear and cytoplasmic proteins will be degraded by the intrinsic enzyme which is activated by the tightly regulated suicidal program. Okay, so next, what are the causes of apoptosis? It occurs normally both during development and also during um, and also during adulthood. Okay, apoptosis it is in physiological conditions and pathological condition. The what are the examples for physiological conditions? Actually, if death by apoptosis in a normal phenomenon that serves to they'll be serving to eliminate cells. So those cells which are no longer needed, that will be eliminated in this type of apoptosis in physiological conditions, because it has to maintain a steady number of area cell population in tissue. A steady number of area cell population have to be maintained. For maintaining such various cell population, some cells have to be eliminated which are no longer needed, and that is nothing that occurs by death by apoptosis in physiological conditions. Okay, destruction of cell example. Actually, destruction of cells during embryogenesis, something may include like implantation or organogenesis or developmental involution metamorphosis. Okay, something like implanting an embryo or organ producing, which is nothing but organogenesis. Developmental involution, something which is developed in our body. Metamorphosis, nothing but morphology rearrangement. Okay, so in those cases in embryogenesis, some cells have to be destructed in order to produce. So destruction of cells during embryogenesis is an example for apoptosis in physiological situation. Next, not only that, involution of hormone dependent tissues. Okay, so for example, actually during menstrual cycle endometrial cell it will be breaking down. Okay, and in case of menopause, follicles in ovarian follicles there occurs atresia. Okay, and lactating breast after weaning. Okay, actually and prostatic atrophy is nothing but decreased number of cells in prostate. Lactating breast after weaning. So if you are withdrawing hormone from the hormone dependent tissues, then it causes apoptosis in physiological condition. For example, endometrial cell breakdown during menstrual cycle, ovarian follicular atresia, lactating breast after weaning, prostatic atrophy. So involution of hormone dependent tissue upon hormone withdrawal. Okay, this is the second cause. Cell loss and proliferating cell populations. For example, we have immature lymphocytes in bone marrow, and in thymus we have immature lymphocytes, and in B lymphocytes, immature lymphocytes in bone marrow and thymus, and B lymphocytes. Okay, So epithelial cells in the intestinal crypts host to maintain. Okay, in intestinal crypts we also have epithelial cells. We need to maintain it in a constant number. So maintaining it in a constant number in intestinal crypts, this is called hemostasis. Okay, so cell loss in proliferating cell population, especially in immature lymphocytes in the bone marrow, and not only in bone marrow, thymus and B lymphocytes. So maturation happens by the cell loss in proliferating cell population, and also maintaining a constant number in hemostasis. Next, we have potentially harmful self-reactive lymphocytes. We have to eliminate those potentially harmful self-reactive lymphocytes. Okay, next, death of host cells that have served their useful purpose. For example, neutrophils in acute inflammatory response, it will be serving a useful purpose. We have to there should occur a death of those host cells where some useful purpose have been undergone, maybe neutrophils in acute inflammatory response, like that. Okay, so thirdly, destruction of cells during embryogenesis, involution of hormone dependent tissues upon a hormone withdrawal, for example lactating breast after weaning, cell loss and proliferating cell population, for example epithelial cells in intestinal crust, and elimination of potentially harmful self-reactive lymphocytes. Okay, and death of host cells after serving some useful process, for example neutrophils in an acute inflammatory response. Okay, what is apoptosis in pathological conditions? DNA damage and accumulation of misfolded proteins, cell death in certain infections, pathologic atrophy in parenchymal organs after duct obstruction. Okay, DNA damage nothing but there occurs radiation, cytotoxic anti-cancer drugs. We have anti-cancer drugs. So because of the cytotoxic anti-cancer drugs, because of the radiation, and because of hypoxia, there will be less amount of oxygen, deprivation of oxygen. So radiation, cytotoxic anti-cancer drugs, hypoxia, it can damage the DNA either directly or not only directly but also via production of free radicals. Because of the production of free radicals or directly, there occurs DNA damage, radiation, cytotoxic anti-cancer drugs, hypoxia. Okay, DNA damage, and not only DNA damage but also accumulation of misfolded proteins. We have misfolded proteins and accumulation of misfolded proteins, and not only accumulation of misfolded proteins but also cell death in certain infections. For example, HIV infections, there occurs cell death. Pathological atrophy in parenchymal organs after duct obstruction. You have duct obstruction in parenchymal organs after duct obstruction, pathologic atrophy. There occurs pathologic atrophy in parenchymal organs, so there occurs duct obstruction. If there occurs duct obstruction, there occurs pathological atrophy in case of parenchymal organs. Okay, in duct obstruction, there occurs pathological atrophy in parenchymal organs. Okay, what are the types? DNA damage, accumulation of misfolded proteins, there occurs in cell death in certain infections, and like HIV, pathological atrophy in parenchymal organs, and that too after duct obstruction. Okay. Next, let us see about the morphology. In morphology, nothing but cell usually shrink in case of apoptosis. In case of necrosis, eosinophilia occurs because of the loss of cytoplasmic RNA. Here, cell shrinkages, cell it will be smaller in size. The cytoplasm it will be very dense. Okay, cell shrinkage, cell it will be very smaller in size. Cytoplasm it will be dense. Okay, chromatin condensation. This is the most characteristic feature of apoptosis. There occurs chromatin condensation. Cell shrinkage smaller in size, cytoplasm it will be dense. Chromatin condensation, most important characteristic feature of apoptosis. Okay, thicker, denser, contrast and clump. Okay, apoptotic cell first shows extensive surface blubbing. There occurs blubbing, then not only blubbing but also it undergoes fragmentation. Apoptotic cell first is extensive surface blubbing. It undergoes fragmentation into membrane bound apoptotic bodies composed of cytoplasm. Okay, membrane bound apoptotic bodies. We have membrane bound apoptotic bodies composed of cytoplasm. um, formation of cytoplasmic bulbs and apoptotic bodies. Nothing but apoptotic cell first shows extensive surface blubbing, not only surface blubbing but also it will be undergoing fragmentation into membrane bone apoptotic bodies. Those membrane bone apoptotic bodies, it is mainly consisting of cytoplasm. Okay, apoptotic was extensive surface blubbing then not only surface blubbing but also it will be undergoing fragmentation. After undergoing fragmentation, membrane bone apoptotic bodies composed of cytoplasm. Okay. Next, phagocytosis of apoptotic cells. We have apoptotic cells that has to be phagocytosed or cell bodies. Usually macrophages help in phagocytosis of the apoptotic cells or cell bodies, usually by macrophages. Cells in case cell in smaller size, cytoplasm it is in dense chromatin condensation. It is most characteristic feature of apoptosis. Next, apoptotic cell first is extensive surface blubbing. Then it will be undergoing fragmentation, not only fragmentation but also membrane bone apoptotic bodies, it will be formed. Phagocytosis of apoptotic cells or cell bodies usually by macrophages it occurs. Now let's discuss about the mechanism of apoptosis. Okay, apoptosis it will be resulting from the activation of enzymes called caspases. Okay, caspases, they are nothing but cysteine proteases that cleave proteins after aspartic residues. We have aspartic residues. After aspartic residues, it will be cleaving proteins. Okay, cleavage of proteins after aspartic residues, and they are nothing but cysteine proteases. So result from activation of enzymes called caspases. Okay, the process of apoptosis it will be divided into an initiation phase during which some caspases become catalytically active. Okay, initiation phase, during that phase some caspases will be catalytically active, and then execution phase. Okay, not only initiation phase but also an execution phase. In execution phase, the process of apoptosis may be divided into an initiation phase, during which some caspases become catalytically active, and then execution phase. So some caspases which is becoming catalytically active in initiation phase, and we also have execution phase, whereas during which other caspases which will be triggering the degradation of critical cellular components. We have critical cellular components, so those degradation of critical cellular components will be happening by the caspases, all other caspases. So all other caspases will be degrading the critical cellular components in case of execution phase. In initiation phase, some caspases it will be becoming catalytically active. There are two distinct pathways it will be converging on the caspase activation. Okay, what are those two distinct pathways which is converging on caspase activation? Mitochondrial pathway and death receptor pathway. Mitochondrial pathway and death receptor pathway. Intrinsic mitochondrial pathway of apoptosis. Okay, in initiation phase some caspase become catalytically active. In execution phase, caspase trigger the degradation of critical cellular components. Okay, next let's see about the apoptosis. Intrinsic pathway, mitochondrial pathway. Okay, in viable cell we have survival signal. Okay, that survival signal it is nothing but it may be a growth factor. That survival signal, when it is reaching the receptor, it will there occurs production of anti-apoptotic proteins. First let's look up see about type of proteins. Anti-apoptotic proteins nothing but BCL2, BCLXL, MCL1. Anti-apoptotic pro-apoptotic acts like cutting. Anti-apoptotic it helps in living, just like that. Remember, pro-apoptotic cutting, anti-apoptotic living. BCL2, BCLXL, MCL1 are example of anti-apoptotic. BCL2, BCLXL, 2XL and MCL1. BCL2, BCLXL, MCL1 are examples of anti-apoptotic, and pro-apoptotic we have Bax and Back. Bax and Back sensors nothing but Puma, Noxa, Bad Bim. Bad Bim, Puma, Noxa. Bad Bim, Puma, Noxa. In viable cell, if there occurs a if there occurs a survival signal like growth factor, there will be production of anti-apoptotic proteins which helps in living, which is nothing. Example is BCL2, BCLXL and MCL1. Okay, so as a result cytochrome C will be gives energy. Okay, so BCL2 or BCLXL, there will be no leakage of cytochrome C. Actually, anti-apoptotic proteins, if it is produced, there will be no leakage of cytochrome C. Okay, so but in case of apoptosis, this is viable cell. Actually, there will be no leakage of cytochrome C. Cytochrome C will be present inside, so the cell lives, and the responsible protein, it is nothing but anti-apoptotic protein BCL2. What is apoptosis? In apoptosis, there will be production of pro-apoptotic proteins. Okay, first let's see. The signal may be an irradiation. Actually, in apoptosis, we have seen what are the causes. In pathological condition, irradiation, DNA damage, accumulation of misfolded proteins, cell death in certain infections, pathological atrophy in parenchymal organs after duct obstruction. So suppose, let's assume like there occurs an irradiation. It damages the DNA. Because of the damage of DNA, there will be activation of sensors. Okay, activation of sensors nothing but it may be bad bim, pulmonoxa, bad bim, pulmonoxa, BH3 only proteins. So those bad bim, pulmonoxa, they are called BH3 only proteins. BH3 only proteins. Okay, activation of sensors. So DNA damage, lack of survival signals, irradiation, DNA, there occurs DNA damage. Because of that, actually in apoptosis, DNA it will be dead because of activation of intrinsic enzymes. Now let's see activation of sensors. Next, antagonism of BCL2. Actually those sensors are nothing. Because of the activation of those sensors, there occurs antagonism reaction of BCL2. BCL2 is nothing but anti-apoptotic. Okay, now activation of Bax or back channel, that is pro-apoptotic. Because of the activation of Bax or back channel, which is nothing but pro-apoptotic, there occurs leakage of cytochrome C and other proteins. So if cytochrome C is leaked and other proteins are also leaked, there occurs activation of caspases. Okay, activation of caspases. If there occurs an activation of caspases, then apoptosis occurs. Okay, activation of caspases, apoptosis occurs. Cytochrome C. Okay, now cytochrome C, it will be we have seen cytochrome C it will be binding a protein called APAF1, apoptosis activating factor 1. Cytochrome C, since it is releasing, it activate caspases that we know which cause apoptosis. This cytochrome C, it will be binding to a protein called apoptosis activating factor 1. Apoptosis activating factor 1. Okay, so this it will be activating caspase 9. This will be activating caspase 9. Okay, cytochrome C binding to a protein called apoptosis activating apoptosis of activating factor 1, APAF1. Means it will be activating caspase 9. Inhibitors of, so certain physiologic inhibitors of apoptosis, IAPs are there. The normal function of IAPs, it is usually it is to block the activation of caspase. This is just to know there are IAPs, inhibitors of apoptosis. Okay, so now cytochrome C, it will be entering apoptosis activating factor 1, caspase 9 it is activated in case of apoptosis. Okay, so next let's look about the extrinsic pathway. Okay, death receptor initiated pathway. Mitochondrial intrinsic pathway is different, and extrinsic pathway, that is also different. Okay, That is different. So now the extrinsic death receptor initiated pathway, there will be death receptors, there will be ligand, T lymphocyte, there will be adaptor protein. The adaptor protein is nothing but FADD. We have to know three terms for this. Death receptors, ligand is nothing but T lymphocyte. Death receptor, ligand, adapter protein. Death receptors, ligand is number T lymphocyte, adapter protein FADD. FADD. Death receptors, ligand, adaptor protein, FADD, ligand, T lymphocyte, So now what happens? So we have next in case we have a death receptor initiated pathway. In this, first we need to know about initiation phase. In initiation phase, so what is expansion of FADD? Fast associated death domain. First we have death domain. The death domain, it will be not active when it is present lonely. Okay, it has to bind with other death domains to form FAS, multimerization. So it has to undergo multimerization, and that multimerization is called FAS. We have death receptor, that is nothing but TNFR1, TNFR1 and FAS. Okay, death receptor are nothing but TNFR1 and FAS death domain, which will be not active when it is lonely, when it is present lonely. FAS TNFR1 is nothing but death receptor. Death receptor, what is a ligand? Ligand is the FASL. FASL is nothing but ligand. This ligand, it will be binding to the FAS, which is nothing but death receptor. Death receptor, ligand may be T lymphocyte also, and that adapter protein is nothing but we have another one adapter protein, and that adapter protein is called FADD. FADD is nothing but fast associated death domain. So FASL, fast associated death domain, fast death receptor. Okay. Next, we have procaspase 8. This procaspase 8, so in extrinsic pathway, totally there are many caspases like 8, 10, 3 and 6. 8, 10, 3 and 6. Okay, extrinsic pathway, but only one caspase it is present in intrinsic pathway, that is caspase 9. Okay, let's see. In caspase, procaspase 8, it is activated by autocatalytic caspase activation. Active caspase 8 is produced by autocatalytic caspase activation. We have autocatalytic caspase activation. Procaspase 8, it is converted to active caspase. Okay, it will be combining with the FAD. This combines with FAD, activate caspase 8. Okay, since procaspase 8, it is cleaving and it is combining with the FAD, it will be activating caspase 8, and that further in executioner further it activates caspases 10 and 9. Okay, 10 and 9. So caspase 8, caspase 10, caspase 9. Okay, caspase 10, caspase 9. In execution pathway, we have 3 and 6. Okay, this is initiation phase. In initiation phase, we have only procaspase 8, 9 and 10. 9 and 10. Okay, 9 and 10, not 3 and 6. But in case of execution pathway, that I'll discuss with you. In case of execution phase, we have caspase. We have caspase 8 and 10. Caspase 8, caspase 10, caspase 3 and caspase 6. Okay, so flip, we have to know about flip. Okay, the pathway of apoptosis, it can be inhibited by a protein, and that protein is called flip, which will be binding to procaspase 8. So flip binds to procaspase 8, but it cannot cleave and activate. So actually procaspase 8, it has to be cleaved. Okay, so that 9 and 10 caspase will be activated, but cannot cleave and activate the caspase because it will be lacking a protease domain. Why it cannot cleave? Because it lacks a protease domain. So, a protease domain, it has to be present. It has to be present in order to cleave caspase sheet. So only if it is cleaved, uh, it, it, it can convert into active caspase form, and an active caspase form it can bind with FAD, and it can activate 10 and 9, and which will lead to execution pathway. In execution pathway, we have, it will activate 3 and 6, 3 and 6, and 3 and 6 will further cleave the DNA, and it will degrade structural components of the nuclear matrix, thus promote the fragmentation of nuclei. So the ultimate aim is degrading the structural components of the nuclear matrix and promoting the fragmentation of the nuclei. That's it. So if we need to know the my case of death receptor or extrinsic pathway, ligand receptor, FAS TNF receptor. TNF is nothing but a receptor. TNF receptor, adapter proteins come into act, initiator caspases, executioner caspases, endonuclease activation, breakdown of cytoskeleton also happens. Endonuclease activation, breakdown of cytoskeleton, cytoplasmic blip. As a result of apoptosis, we have morphologic appearance, cytoplasmic blips, apoptotic bodies. The cytoplasm will be dense. Look, endonuclease and nuclear fragmentation also occurs. So in case of mitochondrial intrinsic pathway, growth factor withdrawal or a DNA damage by radiation or protein misfolding, BCL2 family sensors, it